The only reason I was sitting in that glass-walled conference room overlooking Vancouver's harbor was because of one person, my Uncle Marcus. My name is Elena Hartley. I'm 29 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought I'd finally built a life that had nothing to do with the family who told me I was making the biggest mistake of my life when I came out at 22. Before I tell you exactly what my aunt said the moment the lawyer finished reading the will, and what I did when I walked out of that building, let me ask you something. What time is it where you are right now? And where are you listening from? Because I need you to understand something. When someone you love dies and leaves you everything, and the people who abandoned you suddenly show up with smiles and open arms, you start questioning whether you're losing your mind or they are. It was a Tuesday morning in early June. Pride flags were already appearing on storefronts across the West End, which felt painfully ironic given why I was there. The law office was one of those sleek downtown spaces with floor-to-ceiling windows and furniture that probably cost more than my yearly rent. I'd arrived 15 minutes early, my hands shaking so badly I'd spilled coffee on my jacket in the parkade. Uncle Marcus had died suddenly. Heart attack at 56. One moment he was hanging a new exhibition at his gallery in Yaletown. The next he was gone. I'd gotten the call from his partner, James, who could barely speak through his tears. I'd never heard a human being sound so broken. The funeral had been small. James, me, a handful of Marcus's friends from the art community, some of his gallery staff. My mother hadn't come. Neither had my Aunt Claire or my two cousins. They'd sent flowers with a card that said, "Our condolences," in my aunt's sharp handwriting. Nothing else. I'd spent 7 years being invisible to them. 7 years since that dinner where I'd finally told them I was gay. And my mother had gone silent while Aunt Claire had actually said the words, "This is a phase, and you're going to regret ruining your life." My father had just looked at his plate. My cousins, Brittany and Owen, had exchanged glances like I'd announced I had a terminal disease. Only Marcus had called me that night. "Elena, sweetheart," he'd said, "I'm so proud of you. Come over this weekend. I want you to meet James properly." That weekend had turned into 7 years of dinners, of gallery openings, of Marcus quietly becoming the parent I needed. He'd never made a big deal out of it, never positioned himself as some kind of savior. He was just there, always. And now he was gone. The door to the conference room opened, and I looked up, expecting the lawyer. Instead, Aunt Claire walked in. My entire body went cold. She was 51, impeccably dressed in a black Aritzia suit, her highlighted hair pulled back in a tight bun. Behind her came Brittany and Owen, both in their late 20s now, both looking around the law office like they were appraising real estate. "Elena," Aunt Claire said, her voice dripping with something that might have been sympathy if you didn't know her. "Oh, sweetheart. You look exhausted." I couldn't speak. My throat had closed up completely. "We've been so worried about you," she continued, sitting down across from me like we did this every week, going through this alone. "Marcus was my baby brother. We're all devastated." Brittany sat beside her mother, nodding. "It's been so hard on Mom," she said. She and Uncle Marcus were so close. That was a lie. Marcus had once told me he'd gone 2 years without hearing from Claire after he'd come out as gay 30 years ago. "Some people," he'd said sadly, "would rather have comfortable lies than uncomfortable family." The door opened again. This time it was the lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s named Patricia Chen. She carried a leather folder and had the expression of someone who'd seen every kind of family dysfunction imaginable. "Good morning," she said crisply. "I'm Miss Chen. I'll be executing Marcus Hartley's will today. I see we're still waiting for one person." "Who?" Aunt Claire asked. The door opened one more time, and James walked in. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 3 weeks. His eyes were red-rimmed, his usually perfect posture slightly hunched. He nodded at me, managed a small smile, then sat beside me without looking at anyone else. Aunt Claire's mouth had formed a thin line. "I wasn't aware Marcus's friend would be joining us for family business." "Mr. Reynolds was specifically requested to be present," Miss Chen said coolly. "Shall we begin?" She opened the folder. The first few paragraphs were standard legal language. Marcus had been sound of mind when he drafted this will 2 years ago. It had been updated 6 months ago. He'd been fully aware of his assets and their value. Then came the specifics. To my partner, James Reynolds, Miss Chen read, I leave my personal art collection, currently housed in our shared residence, valued at approximately $300,000. I also leave him the contents of our joint savings account and my pension benefits, which he is entitled to as my common-law spouse under British Columbia law. James's hand found mine under the table. I squeezed it. Miss Chen continued. To my niece, Elena Hartley, I leave the entirety of my commercial property located at 1247 Hamilton Street in Vancouver, British Columbia, which houses Prism Gallery. This includes the building itself, the business operations, all inventory, intellectual property, client relationships, and associated assets. The total appraised value, as of April 2026, is $2,870,000. The room went completely silent. I couldn't breathe. $2.8 million. The gallery. The building Marcus had purchased 15 years ago, when Yaletown was still transitioning, that he'd poured his heart into, that he'd built into one of Vancouver's most respected contemporary art spaces. He'd left it to me. There are conditions, Miss Chen said, and I heard Aunt Claire inhale sharply. Elena must agree to maintain the gallery's operations for a minimum of 1 year, honoring existing artist contracts and maintaining the gallery's mandate to support emerging Canadian artists, particularly those from marginalized communities. She may hire management but must remain the principal decision-maker. If she chooses not to accept these terms, the property will be sold, with 80% of proceeds going to Community, a charity supporting LGBTQ2S+ youth in British Columbia, and the remaining 20% divided equally among Marcus's surviving siblings and their children. That's it? Aunt Claire's voice was shrill. That's not right. Marcus wouldn't do this. Miss Chen looked at her with the expression of someone who'd heard this exact response 100 times. Mrs. Morrison, I can assure you that Marcus Hartley was entirely sound of mind when he drafted and updated this will. I counseled him personally on multiple occasions. This document reflects his explicit wishes. But she's not even Aunt Claire caught herself, but we all knew what she was going to say. She's 29 years old. She knows nothing about running a business. Marcus and I talked about the gallery. He told me he was thinking about family taking it over when he retired. When did he tell you that? I heard myself ask. My voice sounded strange, distant. We spoke regularly, she said, not meeting my eyes. You spoke regularly, I repeated. When was the last time you actually saw him? Silence. The last time I saw you at the gallery was 7 years ago, I said. My voice was getting stronger now, anger burning through the shock. The night I came out, Marcus invited the whole family to an opening. You came for exactly 20 minutes, didn't buy anything, didn't speak to any of the artists, and left before the speeches. I remember because Marcus tried to hide how hurt he was. That's not. And before that? I was standing now. Tell me one artist whose work he represented. Tell me the name of the woman who runs the front desk. Tell me what his favorite piece in his personal collection was. Brittany was looking at her phone. Owen was staring at the table. Aunt Claire's face had gone red. I thought so, I said quietly. You didn't know him at all. Miss Chen cleared her throat. There is one additional clause, she said. Clause number 4. This is a penalty clause. My aunt leaned forward. What kind of penalty? Should any family member contest this will, either through legal action or through attempts to undermine, harass, or interfere with Elena Hartley's operation of the gallery, or should they engage in any action that the executors deem to be in bad faith regarding the terms of this will, the following shall occur. The property shall immediately be placed in an irrevocable trust, to be sold within 90 days. 90% of proceeds shall go to Community. The remaining 10% shall be divided among Marcus's chosen charitable organizations. No family member, including Elena Hartley, shall receive any portion of the estate. This clause is binding and shall be interpreted in the strictest sense to protect the integrity of Marcus's wishes and the dignity of his legacy. You could have heard a pin drop. Furthermore, Miss Chen continued, her voice taking on an edge, Marcus specifically stated that this clause was designed to prevent exactly the kind of behavior he feared from certain family members. His words, which I am authorized to read, were as follows. I have spent 30 years watching my family prioritize comfort over love and money over people. I will not allow them to do the same to Elena, who showed me more genuine care in 7 years than they showed in 30. Aunt Claire's face had gone from red to white. He did not say that. I have his original handwritten notes, Miss Chen said calmly, drafted in my presence, witnessed, and notarized. Would you like to see them? James's hand was still in mine. He was crying silently. This is insane, Owen spoke up for the first time. You're telling us if we even question whether this is fair, we all lose everything? I'm telling you that Marcus Hartley knew his family, Miss Chen said. And he structured his estate accordingly. Elena has 72 hours to decide whether to accept the terms. If she accepts, she becomes the sole owner and operator. If she declines, the alternative distribution takes effect. The choice is entirely hers. Aunt Claire stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. This is what you wanted, isn't it? She was looking at me now, really looking at me for the first time. You manipulated him. You took advantage of him being confused, being influenced by that lifestyle, and you turned him against his own family. Something inside me snapped. That lifestyle? I said quietly. You mean the one where people actually love each other? Where they show up? Where they don't abandon someone because of who they are? We didn't abandon you, she said. You made your choices. I didn't choose to be gay, I said, and my voice was shaking now. I chose to be honest. And you chose to respond by cutting me out of every family dinner, every Christmas, every birthday for 7 years. You chose to act like I didn't exist, and Marcus chose to be there when no one else was. He was my brother. Then where were you? James spoke up, his voice rough. Where were any of you when he had pneumonia 2 years ago and spent 4 days in hospital? Elena was there every day. She brought him books and sat with him when the fever made him confused. Where were you when his father's death anniversary came around every March, and he could barely get out of bed for grief? Elena came over and just sat with him. Didn't try to fix it, just sat there. Where were you for any of it? Brittany was crying now. Mom, can we just go? We're contesting this, Aunt Claire said, gathering her bag. This isn't over. Miss Chen's expression didn't change. Mrs. Morrison, I strongly advise against that course of action. The will is airtight. I've been practicing estate law for 34 years. If you contest this, you will lose. You will trigger the penalty clause, and you will receive nothing. Neither will Elena. The only winners will be the charities. I don't care, Aunt Claire said. This is wrong. Marcus wasn't thinking clearly. He was influenced. He was manipulated. And I'm not going to stand by and watch this family's legacy be handed over to. She stopped. To what? I asked. Say it. She didn't. She just turned and walked out. Owen followed immediately. Brittany hesitated, looking back at me with something that might have been guilt, then followed her mother. The door closed. I sat down hard, my legs suddenly unable to hold me. Elena, Miss Chen said gently. Take your time. You don't have to decide anything today. Can I see the notes? I asked. The ones he wrote? She nodded and pulled out a sheet of paper covered in Marcus's familiar handwriting, the letters slightly shaky from the early stages of the arthritis he'd been dealing with. I read it through blurred vision. Patricia, it said at the top. I need to explain something so you understand why I'm structuring things this way. My family has always been good at caring about appearances more than people. When I came out in the 90s, my parents didn't speak to me for 2 years. My sister Claire stopped inviting me to things unless I came alone, like James didn't exist. I learned to be small around them, to take up less space. Then Elena came out, and I watched them do the same thing to her. And I thought, not again, not to her. So I made sure she knew she had someone. I didn't do anything extraordinary. I just showed up. I just loved her the way family is supposed to love people. The gallery is my life's work. Every piece of art, every artist I've supported, every show I've curated, it all matters to me. But Elena is the only person who ever walked through that gallery and saw the stories, not the price tags. She's the only person who cared about the artists, not the investment potential. She belongs there. She'll honor what I built. She'll make it better. And I know Claire will fight this. I know she'll show up saying I wasn't in my right mind, that Elena manipulated me. All the usual things people say when they can't accept that love and presence matter more than DNA. So I'm making it clear. If they fight this, everyone loses. Because I'd rather see the money go to kids who need support than to people who've never understood what family actually means. Take care of her, Patricia. She's going to need someone in her corner when this happens. Tell her I'm proud of her. Tell her the gallery is hers because she already made it home. I couldn't read the last paragraph through my tears. James put his arm around my shoulders. He loved you so much, he whispered. Miss Chen let us sit there for a long time. Finally, she said, Elena, I need to explain something else. Your aunt is going to do exactly what Marcus predicted. She's going to file a contest. She's going to claim undue influence, diminished capacity, all of it. I'm telling you this not to scare you, but so you're prepared. Will she win? I asked. No, Miss Chen said firmly. Marcus updated this will 6 months ago. He was assessed by 2 independent physicians as part of the process. Both certified he was of sound mind. He met with me 4 separate times to discuss the terms. He wrote those notes in my office with a witness present. He video recorded a statement explaining his reasoning. The will is completely bulletproof from a legal standpoint. Then why the penalty clause? Because, she said gently, Marcus didn't want you to have to fight for years. He didn't want you drained by legal fees and depositions and the ugliness of a contested will. He knew that if he made the penalty severe enough, Claire would have to think very carefully about whether spite was worth losing everything. But she's going to do it anyway, I said. Maybe, Miss Chen said. People often act against their own interests when they're angry. But I'll be honest with you, Elena. I'm going to send Mrs. Morrison a letter today outlining exactly what she stands to lose. The legal fees alone will bankrupt her case. She'll be fighting a losing battle at enormous cost, and if she loses, she triggers the clause. Most people, when they understand that reality, back down. And if she doesn't, then we go to court, I present our evidence, the judge rules in your favor, and Mrs. Morrison leaves with nothing but a bill from her lawyer. But either way, the gallery is yours if you want it. If I want it, I looked out the window at the Vancouver skyline. The harbor was sparkling in the June sun. Container ships moved slowly past the North Shore Mountains. Somewhere in Yaletown, the gallery was probably already open for the day. Sarah, the gallery manager, would be at the front desk. The new exhibition, featuring 3 Indigenous artists from northern BC, would still be up. Marcus had been so excited about that show. He'd spent months working with the artists to tell their stories properly. If you were sitting where I was, holding the legacy of the only person who'd ever really seen you, would you risk losing everything to protect what they built? Would you walk into a fight with people who'd already discarded you once? I need to see it, I said. The gallery. Can I go there before I decide? Of course, Miss Chen said. You have 72 hours. Take your time. James and I walked out of that building, into the bright Vancouver morning. Pride flags were snapping in the wind off the harbor. People were walking their dogs, carrying coffee, living their normal lives. Everything looked exactly the same as it had 2 hours ago, but my entire world had shifted. Are you okay? James asked. I don't know, I said honestly. Are you? No, he said. But I meant what I said in there. About you showing up. Marcus talked about you constantly. You made him so happy. We stood on the sidewalk, 2 people who'd lost the same man, holding on to each other because there was no one else who understood. Will you come with me? I asked. To the gallery? Always, he said. The gallery was a 15-minute walk from the law office. We didn't talk much. I think we were both still processing everything. The streets of Yaletown were busy with the lunch crowd starting to emerge from the converted warehouses and new condo towers. Marcus had always loved this neighborhood. "It's like us," he'd said once. "It used to be industrial and rough, and everyone wrote it off. Then people saw the potential, saw what it could become. That's what good art does, too. Shows people what they're not seeing." Prism Gallery was housed in a 3-story brick building on a corner lot. Marcus had bought it in 2011 when this part of Yaletown was still transitioning. The main gallery space was on the ground floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows that let natural light flood in. The second floor had 3 smaller exhibition spaces and a beautiful open office. The third floor was rental apartments, which provided steady income. It was worth nearly $3 million now. Sarah was at the front desk when we walked in. She was 24, an art history grad from Emily Carr who Marcus had hired 2 years ago. Her face lit up when she saw us, then crumpled. "Elena," she said, coming around the desk to hug me. "I'm so glad you're here. It's been so quiet without him." The gallery smelled like it always did, a mix of coffee from the espresso machine in the corner, the faint chemical scent of acrylic paint, and something else I could never quite identify. Marcus used to call it possibility. The current exhibition was stunning. 3 indigenous artists from the Wet'suwet'en Nation, their work exploring the intersection of traditional knowledge and climate change. Marcus had spent months building relationships with them, making sure they felt safe and respected. One of the pieces, a massive mixed-media installation combining cedar bark weaving with video projections of retreating glaciers, took up most of the main wall. "We've had so much interest," Sarah said, walking us through. "2 of the pieces have already sold. The artists are coming down for a talk next week." Marcus had it all planned out. I stood in the middle of the gallery, turning slowly. Every piece had a story. Every artist had been carefully selected not because they were trendy or bankable, but because Marcus believed in their vision. "Sarah," I said, "can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Did Marcus ever talk to you about his family? His sister?" Her expression darkened slightly. "Once," she said. "She came by about 6 months ago. Just walked in, didn't introduce herself. Started looking at the art like she was shopping for furniture. Marcus was in the back, so I greeted her. She asked if he was here. I said yes. And she just said, 'Tell him, his sister stopped by and left.' Didn't even wait for him to come out. When I told Marcus, he just looked sad and said, 'That sounds about right.'" "Did she ever come back?" "No. But she called a few times." Marcus never seemed happy after those calls. James was standing by the installation, his hand hovering just above the cedar weaving without quite touching. "He was so proud of this show," he said. "He told me it was maybe the most important thing he'd ever done." Amplifying voices that the mainstream art world ignores. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Patricia Chen. Mrs. Morrison's lawyer just contacted my office. She's filing the contest tomorrow morning. The hearing is scheduled for 3 weeks from today. I need to know your decision by tomorrow evening so I can prepare our response. Take care of yourself, Elena." 3 weeks. I looked around the gallery again. At Sarah, who was nervously reorganizing pamphlets at the front desk. At James, who was crying silently in front of art that his partner had loved. At the walls that Marcus had painted himself, the lighting he'd spent hours adjusting, the space he'd poured 30 years of his life into. If you were me, would you fight? Would you risk everything on the chance that justice might actually work? Or would you walk away? Let the lawyers and the angry family and the courts tear it all apart. Take the easy path? I thought about what Marcus had written. She already made it home. "Sarah," I called out, "can you get the artists on the phone? The ones from the exhibition? I need to talk to them." She looked confused but nodded. "James," I said, "I'm going to accept the terms. I'm keeping the gallery." He turned to look at me, his eyes red. "Are you sure?" "No," I said honestly. "I'm terrified. I don't know anything about running a business. I definitely don't know how to fight my aunt in court. But Marcus believed I could do this. And he didn't just leave me a building. He left me a responsibility. to the artists, to the community, to everything he built. She's going to make this hell, James warned. Probably, I agreed. But you know what? I've already been through her version of hell. She already cut me off, already told me I was wrong for being who I am, already spent 7 years pretending I didn't exist. What else can she do to me? Take the gallery. Only if I let her, I said. Only if I give up. And I'm done giving people the power to make me small. I pulled out my phone and called Miss Chen. It's Elena, I said when she answered. I accept. I'm keeping the gallery. There was a pause, then. Good, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. The next 3 weeks were the longest of my life. Aunt Claire filed her contest exactly as predicted. Her lawyer, a man named Robert Whitmore, sent a 23-page document claiming that Marcus had been suffering from diminished capacity due to his heart condition, that I had exercised undue influence by isolating him from his family, and that the will was unconscionable in its disregard for blood relatives. It was all lies, but they were very official-looking lies. Miss Chen responded with a 40-page counterfiling that included Marcus's medical records, psychological evaluations, the video testimony he'd recorded, statements from James, from me, from gallery staff, from friends, and from the artists he'd worked with. She included phone records showing that Claire had called Marcus exactly 3 times in the past 2 years, all of them brief. She included bank records showing that Claire had borrowed $15,000 from Marcus 8 years ago and never paid it back. She destroyed them. But we still had to go to court. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in late June. The courthouse was in downtown Vancouver, a modern building with way too much security and not nearly enough coffee. I wore the only suit I owned, a charcoal gray thing I'd bought for job interviews years ago. James sat beside me in the gallery. Sarah had closed the gallery for the day and come to support me. On the other side of the aisle, Aunt Claire sat with Brittany and Owen, all 3 of them looking grim and determined. Their lawyer, Whitmore, was a man in his 50s with silver hair and an expensive suit. The judge was a woman named Justice Patricia Lee. She was in her 60s, with sharp eyes and an expression that suggested she suffered fools very, very poorly. "We're here today," she began, regarding the contested will of Marcus Hartley, deceased. "Mr. Whitmore, you're representing the contesters. Miss Chen, you're representing the estate and its beneficiary. I've read both your filings. Let's be very clear about something before we begin. This is not a relitigation of Mr. Hartley's life choices. This is not a forum for airing family grievances. This is a legal proceeding to determine whether his will was executed properly and reflects his true wishes. Am I understood?" Both lawyers nodded. "Good. Mr. Whitmore, present your case." Whitmore stood up. He was smooth. I'll give him that. He talked about how Marcus had been struggling with health issues, how heart conditions can affect cognitive function, how the stress of his illness had made him vulnerable to manipulation. "The evidence will show," Whitmore said, "that Elena Hartley ingratiated herself with the deceased during a period of vulnerability, isolated him from his blood family, and exercised undue influence to secure a wildly disproportionate inheritance. The will is unconscionable in its disregard for the deceased's sister, his only sibling, who has been excluded entirely from an estate worth nearly $3 million. He called Aunt Claire to the stand. She testified that she and Marcus had been close, that they'd spoken regularly, that she'd been planning to help him expand the gallery. She said I'd come between them, that Marcus had changed after I started spending time with him, that he'd become distant and cold. He stopped calling, she said, her voice breaking slightly. He stopped coming to family events. It was like Elena turned him against us. Miss Chen's cross-examination was surgical. "Mrs. Morrison," she said pleasantly, "you testified that you and your brother spoke regularly. How many times did you call him in the last 2 years of his life?" I don't know exactly. Phone records show 3 calls, all of them under 5 minutes. All of them initiated by you asking for something. Does that sound like a close relationship?" Aunt Claire's face went red. "We saw each other," When was the last time you visited him at his home? Silence. The gallery? I don't remember exactly. Gallery visitor logs show your last visit was 7 years ago. April 2019. You stayed for 18 minutes. Does that refresh your memory? The courtroom was absolutely silent. You testified that you were planning to help expand the gallery. Did you ever contribute financially to the business? Marcus never asked. Did you ever volunteer your time? Attend exhibition openings? Meet with artists? Help with any aspect of the operation? That wasn't my area. What was your brother's favorite artist? Aunt Claire opened her mouth. Nothing came out. What was the name of his gallery manager? I don't see how. What were his gallery's operating hours? This is ridiculous. Mrs. Morrison. Miss, Chen said, her voice cutting through the room like glass. You claim to have been close with your brother. You claim Elena Hartley isolated him from you. But you can't name a single concrete example of a relationship that existed before she came into his life. You can't demonstrate any involvement in the work that defined his entire adult life. Can you explain that? My brother and I had a private relationship, Aunt Claire said stiffly, just because we didn't parade it publicly. Like he paraded his relationship with Miss Hartley? The niece he took to gallery openings, introduced to artists, mentored professionally, spent holidays with? That kind of public relationship? Whitmore objected. The judge overruled. Miss Chen continued. You borrowed $15,000 from Marcus in 2018. Did you pay it back? That was a family loan. So, no. Did you attend his funeral? The silence was deafening. You sent flowers, Miss Chen said, with a card, to the funeral of your only sibling. And now you want this court to believe that you had his best interests at heart when you filed this contest? She turned to the judge. I have no further questions for this witness. The rest of the hearing moved quickly. Miss Chen presented Marcus's medical evaluations, showing perfect cognitive function. She presented the video testimony where Marcus, looking directly at the camera, explained exactly why he was leaving everything to me. She presented statements from James about my relationship with Marcus, from Sarah about how I'd understood the gallery's mission, from 3 different artists about how Marcus had talked about me with pride and affection. She presented his handwritten notes. When she read them aloud in court, I started crying. I couldn't help it. James read a victim impact statement that wasn't technically required but that the judge allowed. He talked about what it had been like to watch Marcus grieve his family's rejection, and then to watch him come alive again when I came into his life. He talked about the dinners where Marcus would tell stories about taking me to exhibitions, teaching me about art, watching me grow. Marcus didn't leave Elena his gallery because she manipulated him, James said, his voice breaking. He left it to her because she was the only one who ever loved him exactly as he was. No conditions, no discomfort, no requirement that he be smaller or quieter or less than himself. That's not manipulation. That's just love. Finally, Miss Chen rested. Whitmore made a closing argument about family obligations and blood ties. It felt hollow after everything we'd heard. Then it was Miss Chen's turn. Your Honor, she said, this case is very simple. A man who spent his entire adult life building something beautiful left that work to the person he trusted to protect it. His will is legally flawless. It was executed properly, witnessed correctly, and reflects his clear, documented, repeatedly stated wishes. The contest before you today is not about law, it's about entitlement, Mrs. Morrison believes she should have inherited simply because she is Marcus Hartley's sister, despite the fact that she demonstrably had no relationship with him, no involvement in his work, and no understanding of what mattered to him. But inheritance is not an obligation, it's a choice. Marcus Hartley made his choice. He chose Elena because she showed up. She cared. She understood. And she will honor what he built. That is precisely what wills are designed to do, allow people to determine their own legacy. If this court allows this contest to succeed, it sends a message that blood entitlement matters more than genuine relationship. That showing up for decades of someone's life matters less than sharing their DNA. I don't believe that's the message the law intends. I respectfully ask that you uphold Marcus Hartley's clearly expressed wishes and dismiss this contest. Justice Lee looked at all of us for a long moment. I'm going to rule from the bench, she said. I've read the filings thoroughly. I've heard the testimony. And I have to say, Mr. Whitmore, I find your case troubling. It seems designed entirely to punish Miss Hartley for having a relationship with the deceased that his blood family chose not to cultivate. Aunt Claire stood up. Your Honor. Sit down, Mrs. Morrison, the judge said sharply. I'm not finished. She sat. Here's what I see, Justice Lee continued. I see a man who spent 30 years being marginalized by his family for being gay, who then watched his niece experience the same rejection, who responded by building a relationship with that niece based on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine affection, who then, in full possession of his faculties, decided to leave his life's work to the person he trusted to continue it. I see no evidence of diminished capacity. I see no evidence of undue influence. I see no evidence that Marcus Hartley was anything other than thoughtful, deliberate, and clear about his wishes. What I do see is a family that ignored him for decades, suddenly very interested in his assets after his death. The will is upheld in its entirety. The contest is dismissed. Furthermore, I'm awarding court costs to the estate. Miss Morrison, you will be responsible for those costs. This court is adjourned. The gavel came down. For a moment, no one moved. Then James grabbed my hand and squeezed so hard it hurt. Sarah was crying. Miss Chen was gathering her papers with a small, satisfied smile. On the other side of the aisle, Aunt Claire was white-faced. Brittany was staring at the floor. Owen looked like he wanted to disappear. I stood up on shaking legs and walked out of the courtroom. Outside, the Vancouver sun was brilliant. It was one of those perfect June days where the city seems to glow. People were walking dogs along the seawall. Tourists were taking photos of the mountains. The harbor was full of sailboats. You won, James said. Elena, you won. We won, I corrected. Marcus won. Miss Chen came out a moment later. Congratulations, she said. The paperwork will be finalized within a week. The gallery is officially yours. What about the penalty clause? I asked. Does it still? It was never triggered, she explained. They contested, but they didn't succeed. The clause specified that the penalty only applies if they contest and cause significant interference or act in bad faith beyond a simple legal challenge. The judge's ruling determines that while they contested, they didn't engage in the kind of harassment or obstruction that would trigger the clause. You still get everything. I thought Aunt Claire might try to speak to me on the way out, but she walked past without even looking at me. Brittany hesitated, opened her mouth like she might say something, then followed her mother. Owen stopped. I'm sorry, he said quietly. For what it's worth. I'm sorry we weren't better. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Thank you, I said. He nodded and left. The three of us, me, James, and Sarah, stood outside the courthouse for a while, just breathing. What now? Sarah asked. Now, I said. We go back to the gallery. We finish the exhibition. We plan the next one. We do what Marcus wanted us to do. Which is, make space for people who need to be seen. We walked back through downtown Vancouver together, past the glass towers and the converted warehouses, past the pride flags that were everywhere now, bright rainbows against the blue sky, past the harbor, where ships came and went, bringing people and stories from all over the world. Prism Gallery was waiting. I unlocked the door with the key Marcus had given me years ago, back when I'd started helping him with weekend exhibitions. The gallery was cool and quiet. Afternoon light was streaming through the big windows, hitting the cedar installation and making it glow. Sarah, I said, can you call the artists? Tell them the news. Tell them the gallery is safe, their show is safe, everything Marcus promised them is still happening. She nodded and pulled out her phone. James, I said, will you help me? I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to run a gallery or manage finances or any of it. Yes, he said simply. But Elena, you know more than you think. You know what matters. That's more important than anything else. I walked to the center of the main gallery and turned slowly, taking it all in. Every piece of art, every carefully placed light, every intentional choice. Hey Marcus, I said quietly to the empty room. I hope I don't screw this up. I imagined I could hear his laugh. Sweetheart, he would have said. You couldn't screw this up if you tried. You already understand the only thing that matters, which is, that art isn't about the market value. It's about the human value. It's about making people feel less alone. I pulled out my phone and called my girlfriend, Rachel, who I hadn't told any of this to yet because I'd been too overwhelmed. Elena? She answered. How did it go? I own an art gallery, I said, and started laughing. I own a $3 million art gallery in Yaletown, and I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. You won? I won. She screamed so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. I'm coming there right now. Don't move. I'm bringing champagne. We're celebrating. 20 minutes later, the gallery was full. Rachel had arrived with not just champagne, but half a dozen of our friends. James had called Marcus's closest friends from the art community. Sarah had contacted the artists from the current exhibition, and two of them were driving down from Smithers and would be there by evening. Someone put music on the gallery's sound system. Someone else ordered pizza. People were toasting Marcus, sharing stories, crying and laughing in equal measure. I stood by the front window, holding a plastic cup of champagne, watching the street outside. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Vancouver had never looked more beautiful. Rachel came and stood beside me. You okay? I think so, I said. It's just surreal. This morning I was in court fighting for this place, and now it's mine. Actually mine. What are you going to do with it? Everything Marcus wanted, I said. Feature underrepresented artists. Create space for voices that usually get ignored. Make it sustainable so it can keep existing. And maybe I paused. Maybe create a mentorship program. For young queer artists who need someone to believe in them. Like Marcus believed in you. Exactly like that. The party went until late. People told stories about Marcus, how he'd discovered unknown artists and given them their first shows. How he'd fought with banks and city councils to make art accessible. How he'd never compromised on his vision even when it meant financial sacrifice. He once turned down a sale, one artist said, laughing through tears. Some tech bro wanted to buy a piece, offered twice the asking price, but wanted the artist to change the title because it was too political. Marcus told him the gallery wasn't for sale to people who wanted to sanitize truth. Kicked him out right there. Another friend remembered. When I came out as trans, my family disowned me. Marcus gave me a job at the gallery, no questions asked. Paid me under the table until I got my documents sorted. Treated me like I was always who I said I was. He saved my life. Story after story. Person after person. All of us brought together by this man who'd built something bigger than himself. Around midnight, it was just me, James, and Rachel left. We sat on the gallery floor, leaning against the walls, exhausted and happy and sad all at once. I have something for you, James said. He pulled out a small wrapped box. Marcus asked me to give you this if anything happened to him. He set it aside 2 years ago. My hands were shaking as I unwrapped it. Inside was a silver bracelet with a small engraved charm. The charm was shaped like a prism, the gallery's logo. On the back it said, "You already made it home. M." I put it on my wrist and cried harder than I had through the entire day. He knew, James said softly. He always knew this would be yours someday. He was just preparing you for it. I'm not ready, I whispered. No one ever is, James said. But you'll figure it out, and you won't be alone. I'll be here. Sarah will be here. Rachel will be here. Everyone who loved Marcus will be here. What would you tell him? I asked. If you could, right now? James thought for a moment. That I'm keeping my promise. That I'm taking care of Elena. That his legacy is in the best possible hands. What promise? The night before he died, James said, his voice breaking. We were lying in bed, and out of nowhere, he said, "If anything happens to me, make sure Elena knows she's strong enough. Make sure she doesn't doubt herself. Make sure she understands that the gallery was always hers." I thought he was being morbid. I told him to stop talking like that, but he just smiled and said, "I need to know. You'll tell her." So I promised, and I'm telling you, you're strong enough, Elena. You were always strong enough. The three of us sat there until the streetlights came on outside, until the last of the sunset faded, until Vancouver settled into its night rhythm. Finally, Rachel said, "We should go home. You need sleep. Tomorrow, you start your new life as a gallery owner." We locked up carefully, set the alarm, turned out the lights. I stood on the sidewalk one last time, looking at the building. My building now. "Thank you," I whispered to Marcus, wherever he was. "Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for making me feel like I mattered." And I swear I felt him smile. The next morning, I woke up early and went back to the gallery. I had work to do. First, I called a meeting with Sarah and the two other part-time staff members. I told them the gallery was secure, their jobs were safe, and I needed their help learning everything. They were enthusiastic and patient, walking me through the systems Marcus had set up. Then I started making lists. Artists to contact, exhibitions to plan, financial systems to learn, marketing strategies to implement. The business side was intimidating, but I'd figure it out. I spent the afternoon going through Marcus's office. He'd left everything meticulously organized, which made me cry all over again. In a folder labeled for Elena, I found a complete manual he'd written about running the gallery. Every vendor, every contact, every quirk of the building, every lesson he'd learned in 30 years. On the last page, he'd written, "Remember, this isn't about making money. It's about making meaning. Trust your instincts. Support artists who need support. Don't compromise on your values. And when you're tired or scared or overwhelmed, remember why this matters. Because art changes lives. Because stories heal wounds. Because seeing yourself reflected in someone else's work can save you when nothing else will. That's what you're protecting. That's what makes this worth it." I taped that page to my office wall. Over the next few months, I threw myself into learning. I took online courses in arts administration and business management. I met with every artist Marcus had worked with, listening to their stories, understanding their needs. I implemented new systems, hired a bookkeeper, created a clearer financial structure. But more importantly, I started planning the mentorship program I'd told Rachel about. I called it the Marcus Hartley Emerging Artist Fellowship. It would provide 6 months of gallery space, materials, stipend, and mentorship to one young LGBTQ2S+ artist per year. The first fellow would be announced in September, during Pride season. When I posted the application, I got 76 responses in the first week. Reading through them broke my heart and put it back together. So many young people who'd been rejected by their families, who'd been told they were wrong or broken or confused, who'd found solace in art, who just needed someone to believe in them. I selected a 22-year-old trans painter from Surrey named River. Their work was raw and honest, exploring gender through abstract landscapes. When I called to tell them they'd been chosen, they cried so hard they couldn't speak. "I can't believe this is real," they finally managed. I've been making art alone in my room for 5 years because I couldn't afford classes and my parents won't support me, and I just thank you." "Thank you. Thank Marcus," I said. "This is his legacy. But also, River, you earned this. Your work is extraordinary. I'm honored to show it." The fellowship exhibition opened in October. River's paintings filled the main gallery, bold and strange and completely unique. At the opening, they stood beside their largest piece, shaking and proud and terrified. "This is called Becoming," they told the crowd. "It's about the moment you realize you get to decide who you are, that no one else's opinion matters as much as your own truth." The gallery was packed. "We sold 4 paintings," River cried again. Their parents didn't come, but they brought their chosen family, a group of friends who'd supported them when no one else would. They reminded me of the family I'd built with Marcus and James and Rachel. After everyone left, River approached me nervously. Can I ask you something? Of course. How did you know you were strong enough for this? To fight for the gallery? To run it? To do all of this? I thought about that question for a long time. I didn't, I said honestly. I still don't. Most days. But someone I loved believed I was, and I decided that was enough. And here's what I've learned, River. You don't need to feel strong to be strong. You just need to keep showing up, keep trying, keep choosing yourself even when it's hard. That's all strength really is. They nodded, absorbing this. And, I added, you build a family who shows up when you can't, who believes in you when you don't believe in yourself, who loves you not despite who you are, but because of it. That's what Marcus did for me. That's what I'm trying to do for you. 6 months after I inherited the gallery, on a cold December evening, I stood in the main space after closing. The city lights were twinkling outside. Snow was starting to fall, rare for Vancouver. Inside, it was warm and quiet. I pulled out my phone and opened my voice memos. I'd been recording thoughts to Marcus since he died, things I wished I could tell him. Hey, I said to the empty room. It's me again. I wanted to tell you that the gallery is doing well. We're sustainable. We're growing. Rivers Fellowship was a huge success, and we've already got funding for next year's fellow. I met with a donor who wants to establish an endowment so the program can continue permanently. Can you believe that? I also wanted to tell you that Aunt Claire called last week. First time since the trial. She didn't apologize exactly, but she said she'd been thinking about everything. That maybe she'd been wrong. That maybe you knew what you were doing. It's not enough, but it's something. Mostly, though, I wanted to say thank you. Not just for the gallery, for showing me what family can be, for teaching me that love is a choice, not an obligation, for proving that one person who truly sees you matters more than 100 who don't. I miss you every single day. But I feel you here, in every exhibition I plan, in every artist I support, in every young person who walks through those doors and sees themselves reflected in art for the first time. You're everywhere in this place, and I'm going to make sure your legacy doesn't just survive. I'm going to make sure it grows. I ended the recording and looked around one more time. Home, I said quietly. You gave me home, and for the first time in my life, I truly felt it. If there's anything I want you to take from my story, it's this. Family isn't always the people you're born to. Sometimes it's the people who choose you, who show up, who see you exactly as you are and love you anyway. Don't waste your energy fighting for the approval of people who've already decided not to give it. Instead, invest in the relationships that feed your soul. And if someone leaves you their legacy, whether it's a gallery or a recipe or just a memory, honor it. Not by preserving it exactly as it was, but by keeping its spirit alive. By asking yourself what they valued, what they stood for, what they hoped for, and then carrying that forward in your own way. Marcus taught me that inheritance isn't about money or property. It's about values. About seeing the world through someone else's eyes and letting that vision change you. About being brave enough to build something that matters, even when it's hard. 3 years later, the gallery is thriving. We've supported 47 emerging artists. The Marcus Hartley Fellowship has expanded to include a sculpture component and a digital arts component. We've started an outreach program that brings art education to schools in underserved communities. And every single day, I walk into that building and feel him with me. Because love doesn't end when someone dies. It transforms. It becomes something you carry forward, something you give to others, something that ripples out through time and space and changes the world in small, quiet ways. That's Marcus's real legacy. Not the building or the business, but the belief that everyone deserves to be seen, to be valued, to have their story told. And as long as I'm here, as long as this gallery stands, that belief will continue. Because that's what family does. We carry each other forward. We honor each other's dreams. We make space for each other's stories. And we never, ever give up on the people who didn't give up on us.